faithful to the book up until about the halfway point, and then veers off into sort of his idea of how it would all go. And, you know, he's such a good storyteller. I really trust that. And it's like, I think for me, it's like when Dave Barry and I were invited into a basement of a church in Manhattan to see the early rendition of Peter and the Starcatcher as a play. And we were with this guy named Rick, who, you know, we would realize about a year later was Rick Ellis, who had written Jersey Boys, and was writing our play. And Rick pulled out a foam core and had all the scenes of his play laid out. He only could stage about 4 of them with actual actors, but he wanted to sort of show us the arc of the story. And at the end of it, Dave's nudging me, and he said, "Where was this guy when we were writing our book?" Because he was so smart, you know. And I hope that's how we'll feel if and when we see Gary Ross's rendition of Starcatchers, because I'm sure it will be much smarter than any we did. I've had this amazing opportunity, thanks to Disney, really, and in spite of Disney in other ways, to write the Kingdom Keepers series. I went down for my first time in my 40s to Disney World with my kids, and I mentioned to my rock and roll bandmate, Dave Barry, I play bass and he plays guitar, and I mentioned to him that I was going down there, and he said, "You're not going down there without me. I am the world's expert on Disney World." And Dave is, in fact, the world's expert on everything. And sadly, it's true. The guy is really smart, and he can be really frustrating because he doesn't know everything. Yes. And I wanted to outdo him. We were always sort of teasing each other and playing pranks on each other. So at the time, my mystery and adult thrillers, I have another one coming out in June, available at bookstores near you. But at the time, my thrillers were published by a subsidiary of Disney. And so I called my publisher and said, "Look, you know, I'm going to Walt Disney World with Dave Barry, and I would just love to sort of one-up him if there's any way, because he's like the world's expert on Disney World. Is there somebody that could tour me around or do something to sort of, you know, put Dave in his place for an afternoon?" And my publisher said, "Well, let me work on this." And we get down there, and when we check into this beautiful hotel called the Grand Floridian, and there are cakes in the Barry's room and cakes in the Pearson's rooms that have covers of our books that are edible. And I mean, they're perfect renditions. We just went, what? And all our passes for being there are fanned out on the desk. It's all for free, it turns out. We get up, and we cut all the lines, even the fast passes. We go in the back doors and right onto all the rides. Our kids still think to this day that's how you see Disney World. Dave and I are like, "Can you believe this?" It's unbelievable. But they, you know, so in fact, one time in my life I upstaged Dave Barry, but only because I asked somebody else for help. But at the end, you know, I grew up in Connecticut and I was raised well, and so I got back and I wanted to thank my publisher for this. It was an over-the-top experience. The week before, this woman had toured John Travolta. So that was the level of treatment we were getting. And Dave kept going, "Dude, it was just amazing." And I was having all sorts of sort of epiphany moments, because when you go to a Six Flags or another kind of amusement park, even the boardwalks here, they really are there to spin you and make you throw it. I mean, go to your somebody and make you throw it. When you go to a Disney attraction, if you're a writer, you're pretty quickly, even a writer who's never been, you see that every single attraction is a story, which is, for those of you who want to write, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I saw this over and over, whether I was on Splash Mountain, you know, whether I was in the Haunted Mansion, wherever I was, I kept thinking, wow, I'm actually moving through a story. There's this subtle story, which is why we love to go back, because you don't know it, but you're going through a story. You're being told a story. You aren't just being spun and dumped and all of that. You're being led through a story. So when I called to thank my publisher, he said, well, no, just stop, because I had nothing to do with this. I made one phone call over to Disney Books, and they set it all up for you. And this is a publisher I don't even work for at the time. And I called somebody named Wendy Lefcon. She did all of this. So I called up Wendy Lefcon, and I thanked her and said, you gave my kids and me the most amazing 3 days in Disneyland, Disney World anybody could ever have. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was so impressed because on every attraction I realized I was in a story. I was in a beginning, middle, and end. And she said, wait, nobody ever gets that. Did you really catch on to that? So we got into sort of the intellectual conceit behind the Disney attractions. And she said, do you know that there's a group of Disney employees called the Imagineers? And I said, the what? And she said, these are people, grown men and women, who conceive of these attractions maybe 10 years out and have the brains to put together the story in a visual and audio way so that you will feel a story and be part of the story every time you go on one of these rides. And every time you go on, you'll see something new. And every time you go on, you'll hear something new. And it will forever evolve. And you'll love going on these things 20 times, which is what makes Disney such a huge success. And I said, I want to be an Imagineer. Is that not the coolest job on the face of the planet? So I did not know. And she said, well, they build Bibles of every attraction. There's a huge backstory of everything that went on in the characters' lives before the day you step into that cart or sit in a chair or get in the boat. They have built a story backstory so that this part that you're in makes sense. And I said, well, that's what I do with my books. I build these Bibles that lead up to the day I'm going to start the book because I need to know the backstory if I'm going to know my story. And she said, Ridley, have you ever thought about writing for kids? And I said, yeah, I've got 2 kids, but I wouldn't even know what to write. And she said, how about you write one of your adult crime thrillers set inside our theme parks for a younger reading audience? And I said, wow, that would be amazing. I will shoot you over some outlines. The only problem is I would need full access to your theme parks. And I said, for all my crime novels, I actually go on rides with the police. I spend time with the medical examiner. I do all this stuff because I believe if I write about the truth, it reads better. It doesn't read like fiction. And I said, I realized this would be set in a theme park, and it would be somewhat fantastical. It would be fantasy. But I still would need full access to the theme parks. And she said, oh, well, we don't do that. And I said, great, thanks again for the wonderful time. Then, about a month later, she called up and she, answered the phone, and this voice said, okay, full access. And so they gave me a VIP pass, which I still carry. I can get into any park around the world with my family whenever I want. And if I call ahead, they assign me an Imagineer, and I go in when the parks are closed. So for the first Kingdom Keepers book, I was about a third of the way through writing it. I had outlined it, and I went down to my first of these, now 20-some, 22 or something of these tours I've done. And, it was maybe 5:30 in the morning, the park was shut down, and I would name an attraction, the Imagineer would take me to the attraction, we would walk through it with it shut down, I would take photos, take notes, shoot video, they would bring the employees in who run these attractions and start it up for me, for moi. And say, hop in, and I would ride the thing 8, 10, 12 times before anybody was on it. Again, taking crazy notes, seeing everything I saw, jamming it all in my author's notebook that I always carry with me, and then run home. And, I'd do maybe 2, 3 attractions and run home and write more chapters. So the first time I was there, I went into Pirates of the Caribbean when it was shut down, and walked that route. Also went through the route on boat when it was shut down, and then they turned all the animatronics, the lights, the sound, all of that on. But I wanted to see what it was like when you're in there going through in the boat and it was pitch black, or maybe emergency lights, like these things over the exit signs. So I did that, and we were going along, and at the time, he was called Blackbeard up on the frigate. And I said, is there any way I can go hang out with Blackbeard? I said, Ridley, we're supposed to let you do whatever you want to do. And I'm like, yes! and I got out, and I got on these, catwalks and went around, and I hung out with Barbosa on the frigate, and sort of saw how he's constructed, what he's made of. And I get there, and this guy has hair glued on his arm. He has warts. He has brown teeth, bloodshot eyes. He looked totally real. I mean, just mind-boggling, totally real. And I got, maybe 20 minutes later, I got back in the boat with this guy, and I said, where we are in the boat, you can't see any of that detail. You don't see the hair, you don't see the warts, you don't see any of that stuff. Why would you go to the expense and bother to do that? And he said, because if we don't do it, it won't look right. Which is like writing. You put in all this detail to make it feel real. Do you have to? Maybe not. But if you leave it out, it all seems sort of fake. It doesn't feel real, and you don't care about the characters, and you don't visualize the characters. So, these worlds started to marry and meet. And I went into It's a Small World on that same trip, maybe a half hour later, 45 minutes later, still dark out. Went in, the ride was dark. They didn't turn on the music, they didn't turn on the lights, they didn't have that annoying song. And all the dolls were like, they were all turned off. So it's $1,000 dolls in these cute little costumes, but they're all like, we're going through, and I'm sort of freaking out. And then, out of the corner of my eyes, two of the dolls do this. And I jumped out of this boat, and I landed. And the Imagineer said, "What's with you?" And I said, "Two of the dolls moved. Did you not see two of those dolls move?" And he said, "Ridley, the ride is shut down. There is no way these dolls move." And I said, "I saw the dolls move." And I took out my notebook and I said, "Two of the dolls moved." and I swear they moved. And I'll tell you a little story about that. But so I'm in this band with Dave Barry and Matt Groening, who created The Simpsons, and Amy Tan, and Scott Turow, and Greg Iles, and Stephen King. And I've been in the band for 20 years. And so I'm back home writing a chapter about 5 teenagers getting inside the park after dark. They're being pursued by Disney villains. They're trying to figure out this really tricky puzzle that they can't untangle. It's pitch black. They're freaking out. And I write, and two of the dolls moved. I backspace and I said, no, 4 of the dolls. And I backspace and I said, wait a second, I'm in a band with Stephen King. Oh, the dolls all start breaking on and walking like Chucky, and diving into the water and swimming towards the kids, and they're snapping at the kids, and I'm going, "Oh, Stephen would love this." So much fun with this scene. And so time after time after time, I was allowed to go into these parks, first Magic Kingdom several times, then Animal Kingdom several times. I went on Expedition Everest when it was shut down. It took 2.5 hours to walk. We started at like 4:30 in the morning. They brought in, this is Disney. Disney does nothing small. They flew in the guy who engineered the whole thing, just so he could walk me through it. And so we walked through this thing. It takes forever. It's fascinating. The way it's $100 million roller coaster. Back when it was built. So what is it worth now? And so he's stepping me through. It's actually 3 different structures. They're all interconnected. It's really, I'm kind of a math science guy, so it was really fascinating for me. And we get done with this thing. And he says, "So now we're going to turn it on and you can ride it." And I said, "Oh, I so appreciate the tour. I don't do roller coasters." And he said, "I got up at 4 in the morning. You're doing my thing. Put me on alone, turn it on, and send me on Expedition Everest alone." I'm screaming. I'm sure for them, they're just going, grown adults somewhere lost in their thing. Like, at one point, it pulls to a stop, and it looks like you're going to just lose it and go right off a broken rail. Then it backs up at 45 miles an hour through the dark, and this Yeti comes down to like pick your nose. And then you do, at the very end, you do like a double or triple loop that pulls 2.5 Gs So your teeth are in one time zone, and everything in another. And I got off the thing, and I was going around the animal kingdom the whole day. I certainly thought, Ridley's bombed again. I don't drink, so that was an odd thing. But it was totally nuts. It was a great experience. But I realized after this sort of epic tour of Expedition Everest that I had to have that as a big, huge part of the book. So it ends up the setting for the final maybe 100 pages of the second book. Third book, Epcot, same kind of thing. Fourth book, Disney Hollywood Studios, same kind of thing. And all along, I had seen, you have to, when you write something, guys who want to write, you write, it sounds so simple, it's the hardest thing in writing. You write a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sounds so, oh yeah, you do that. No, you can't. And so when you write a series,
or you leave them hanging off the ship.
Each book is a beginning, middle, and end, 3 pieces. But the series has to be a beginning, middle, and end. So each of your 3 pieces has to be hinting at and leading to the middle sets of books, which have a whole different sense of development for the characters and plots, and lead into a finish for the whole series. While you're writing that, and if you're as anal as I am, it also goes down to where every chapter has a beginning, middle, and end, and when I get really in need of medication, it's every paragraph. Middle, and end. But seriously, that's what makes for tight storytelling. So, I go through this process, and I knew I wanted to move the kids, the Kingdom Keepers, of 5 kids, battling the Disney villains to keep the magic alive in the Disney Kingdom. And it happens, for the sake of attorneys and other legal issues, that the kids are holograms. That was the only way I could wreak havoc on these kids, and Disney Company allowed me to do it. But once I came up with that idea, which just was an inspired moment, the Disney attorney said, oh, we have no problem killing kids that are holograms. I knew I wanted to get the Kingdom Keepers from the East Coast, Disney World, to the West Coast, Disneyland. And I had actually conceived of doing this on Disney on Ice. And, I could see Finn and Charlene and stuff out there. We could never work out the licensing agreement. It turns out, we could have, because about 18 months ago, Disney bought all that back. But at the time, it was licensed out to another company who said, no. We're not going to have, holograms dancing on ice. So I had to think of a way to do it, and as kind of a treat, Disney sent Dave Barry and me and our families for free on a Disney cruise. And it was unbelievably spectacular. And then they sent me on another Disney cruise. And I started to get the hint, and I said, maybe are we thinking about Kingdom Keepers on the cruise lines? And finally, I was at a meeting with a bunch of people from Disney on one of these ships, and I explained that I had been turned down for about the 3rd time on Disney on Ice, and the publicity woman who was at this meeting said, well, do you know we occasionally move our ships from the East Coast to the West Coast, and in January we're moving our ship for the season over to there through the Panama Canal. Would you like to go on that trip? And I went, yes! I like that. So they gave us a 15-night trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. They wouldn't take the families, but I was able to take my wife. And I took crazy notes and wrote, as I sat down to write this book, I called my editor, Wendy Lefcon, and all editors at Disney are named Wendy. This happens to be the Lefcon variety. And I said, this book is going to be like 1,100 pages, because this was the most unbelievable experience. And they let me into all the places on the ship that even the people who work on the ship don't go. It was I knew what an extraordinary opportunity I was getting, because this woman, dressed in her whites and everything, who's leading me around, said, this is so cool, I've never been here. Going into places that even the high-ranking executives of the ship had not been in. I went in the engine room, the crew quarters, the kitchens, all the galleys, just amazing places all through this ship. The fireworks area, the tech room where all the surveillance is done, the radio room. I went up on the bridge with the captain. got the ring that go, it was unbelievable. And of course we went through the Panama Canal and did all that. And so she sort of said, there's just no way you can write a 1,200-page book. And I said, well, then I'm writing 2. And we stretched the series. So I wrote the 5th book, which was the first half of the tour on the ship, the cruise. And now book 6, which is what I'm here for, which is why we had a nautical cover, ladies and gentlemen. Because it's the second half of that cruise, which was always conceived by me as one big story. So I actually, in the first book, I just leave a literal cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And I have learned not to do that. I received approximately 4,500,000 emails saying, "You idiot, I'm going to kill you." I won't be doing that again. Right? One more. And you know, it did actually, for me anyway, make it into 2 pieces of the same story. So this story that I hope you will read is the second half of the cruise. Things get a lot darker. There was, if you read the 5th book or have not, there is a very dark passage that is brought on board the ship, and what's in there begins to reveal itself as more powerful and more terrifying than anyone knew. We go into the caves of Aruba, which, you know, I had to look for another bathing suit after I went through those. It scared me so much. Aruba has a really creepy backstory. It was a slave island. There was really no anything made on Aruba back. You know, there were no plantations, no anything. So what plunderers did is they came in and took the people off of Aruba as slaves and sold them in South America. So it has this really dark, gloomy past. And there are places like the caves on that southern coast that really feel that way. I mean, it feels odd when you're in these places. And that feeds me, you know, like nothing. So we go through the Panama Canal, which was an amazing experience. And, of course, no Panama Canal docking and celebration would be possible without Maleficent making an appearance. And we got over to Costa Rica, and I like to recreational tree climb. I go very high in trees, like 150 feet, up into trees with safety equipment and have lunch and do that kind of thing. So one of the things offered by the Disney Cruise Line were zip lines, and I said, sign me up for those. So I went on Costa Rican zip lines, and then realized, ooh, the Kingdom Keepers have to do this, but at night. So there's a lot of fun stuff. And I had spent years, actually back in my crime writing days, which I still do, but I would take the month of March and I went to a little place that was a tent hotel. It was a hotel, but you were in tents. You actually had maid service to your tents. There was no electricity, and no kids were allowed back when I had no kids. And I would write there, you know, incessantly, and visit Mayan temples. That's about all there was to do in these days. So I really got intrigued with the whole Mayan temple thing, and so I couldn't complete Kingdom Keepers 6 without a very dark, scary visit to the Mayan temples, which is what the book sort of culminates. So it's a little bit of a darker book. There's some spoilers in it, which I hope you won't share online because it'll ruin it for other people. There's some moments that I'm going to get, you know, even more emails for. That's okay. And as all of this built up in me, and the Kingdom Keepers, you know, started out, we sold like 7 copies, which is great, but it isn't great for Disney. And then it got some, this is 9 years ago, and it got some momentum, and that first book actually picked up and started to sell, and they had to reprint it, and it started doing really well, and Disney came back to me and said, hey, could you write a second book? And I said, I can write a ton of books. You know, let's just get this thing going. So I envisioned what I thought would be a 5 or 6 book series, and as I said, I started plotting out the beginning, middle, and end of that series, and then I plugged that book that is now out into it, so it became a 7-book series. And as I was recently, and by recently I mean about 2 years ago, as I was looking now again at my outline and making sure my 7th book outline was going to work to bring this all together, by then I had met all of you. And I realized that one of the neat things I didn't know until I started writing Starcatchers and the Kingdom Keepers is that younger readers and adults alike, because half of these books sell to adults, half of them sell to younger readers, is that these books get read multiple times. I've had kids tell me they've read the first book 11 times, 7 times, 6 times, which is just so cool. But I also realized that they know the book better than I do. I mean, I rewrote it 4 to 6 times. I never rewrite a book less than 4 times. So I read about 2,000 pages for you to read one of these things. But, you know, this idea that I had Kingdom Keepers experts out there really began to sort of take hold of my heart. And I started thinking this would be sort of grossly unfair of me, you know, one person to decide how all of this is going to end, because it is going to end. And I felt like I would disappoint somebody if I couldn't find a way to get feedback from these rabid readers on how it should end, who should end up with whom, all of the sort of neat questions that need to be asked. But how do you do that? So I have spent the last 2 years working with Disney to figure out a way to do that. And on Tuesday it launched. I worked with a startup ebook company called Colloquy, and Colloquy has built a free app for all the platforms, Android, iPhones, everything, and a free website. And we have launched something called Kingdom Keepers Insider. It's not a commercial enterprise. It's a way to engage young and adult readers into being writers with me. So I have, once you finish 6, which I hope will be at the end of tonight, the first 6 chapters of book 7 are already online. So you can read the first 6 chapters of the next book. The 7th chapter is up there, but I'm asking for your input. I want you to write fan fiction. I want you to tell me what characters are going to be in it. I want you to help me determine how we're going to end what I think is this fun, epic series that we've all gone through. But it would be unfair of me to do it alone, so we're going to do it together. It's going to be fun. It's going to be crazy because nobody's ever done this to our knowledge. So it's sort of a multiple. We expect thousands of readers to help do this. And by contribute, I mean there are people, like in this next chapter, I've asked, what would the temples in Mexico look like after an earthquake? And so I'm going to have kids and adults write a paragraph of what the temples would look like after an earthquake. The community of KingdomKeepersInsider.com is going to vote on the best one of those, and that's going to be in the book. That's going to be the description of the jungle in the book. So you're going to see your work, and you're going to be thanked in the acknowledgments for the contributions to this book, for helping me steer it and go. But the idea is to do one big writing project together. It may fall flat on its face. I don't think it will. These people are brilliant who put it all together. It means I'm basically working, 12, 13 hours a day around the clock, but that's what I do anyway. So I've kind of pushed aside my crime novel for a few months. We're going to write about 40 chapters together, and then they're going to lock me in a hole somewhere, and I'm going to finish the book, and we will print it this time next year. But it will have your words in it, your ideas in it, and a lot of my words in it, and a lot of my ideas in it, and a lot of my research. I just was out in Disneyland, hint, hint, hint. And all of those attractions, rides, areas, characters, which is just such a cool area. And the reason I always knew I had to move it there was, after all, that's where it all started. And I just didn't see any way you could bring something like Kingdom Keepers to a close without going back to its roots. So I also was able to go into the Burbank archives, and they gave me a private tour of the back of the archives. And if you want to have goosebumps, pull down, I said, could I just see that notebook? And I pulled down a notebook, and it was a story meeting of Walt Disney and his whole crew for one of the great animated movies. I forget which one now. And he had the brilliance to have a stenographer in these meetings. So what you read is just like a script. Walt says this, 2 guys say that, Walt says this, 2 guys, and you see this evolution of an idea to change the attraction this way or that way, or the movie, this, it just blows your mind. And I was just like Goosebump City, and then I got along, and there was Peter and the Starcatcher on the shelf. And I about died. I said, my book is in here? And she said, it's a Disney book. We've got all the stuff. We've got all the records. All the Gary Ross meetings and all that stuff's going to be in there. It's just unbelievable. It gave me a true sense. It was the first time, I think, I understood that in some tiny speck of a way, all this stuff we're doing is a piece of Disney history. So, I mean, I hope you guys will sign up for KK7 Insider, because we're all going to be part of Kingdom Keepers, and that's already a part of Disney history. So it's super exciting. I'm just so grateful you all made the effort to get out here. I know you need to buy multiple copies of the new book. I think we have some giveaways for you, and I'd love to take some questions and try to get the answers.
Thanks, cards. The cards. Questions.
You better give me the answer. Yeah.